Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for our guests following us online. We're connecting here from Dubai, UAE, for our annual meetings on Global Future Councils and Cybersecurity. We've got a great panel with us today, and we're going to actually dig into writing out cyber storms. We've seen kind of continuous cyber attacks underway over the last months. If we think just in the last few weeks alone, we saw a ransomware attack on a London nursery chain where sensitive data on 8,000 children was put up online with names, addresses, and photographs. Just before that, we saw a cyber attack on a airline baggage and check-in system, which led to hundreds of delays and exposed vulnerabilities. Just the month before, we saw an attack on a major auto manufacturer, which then led to not only a halt in production, which I think here we have at roughly $50 million a week, but also led to very intensive debates on what was the state of the cyber insurance policy at the time of the attack and whether this was an insurable mechanism. I trust that woke up a lot of CFOs and chief legal officers around the world. And we can go on and on with these examples. So we are in a space that we're under kind of continuous cyber attack, cyber threats, and also in an area where we're moving quickly into AI. That's been a key topic throughout the discussion here on, okay, what's the role of artificial intelligence play in this, in both expanding the surface area of attacks, providing new tools to cyber attackers, but also can it help us actually defend ourselves in a very complex and interconnected world. So we'll have a chance to dig into these topics in more depth in the next 45 minutes. But before we jump in there, I'd like to start by just introducing our panelists that we have with us today. So I have Samir Saran, President, Observer Research Foundation, a longtime collaborator and friend, joining us. We have on my left, Kemba Walden, with President, Paladin Global Institute, and be curious also to hear about your latest work and domains. Across from me, I have Joe Levy, CEO of Sophos, based out of the United Kingdom. And then Dario Leandro, Genua, Secretary of Innovation, Science and Technology, joining us from Argentina. So thank you for everyone, and looking forward to discussion, rich discussion here today. Now, I want to come back to this question around the looking at this kind of wide range of threats, challenges that we're facing, and dig in particularly into some of the geopolitical, geoeconomic elements of this. The World Economic Forum publishes a global cybersecurity outlook every January. And our most recent report highlighted that 60% of organizations have adapted their cybersecurity strategies due to geopolitical pressures, right? So they've rethought their strategy, not just on supply chain, not just on manufacturing, but their cybersecurity strategy as a result of geopolitical pressure. Adjusting operations, sometimes halting or changing operations in different regions, and changing vendors in other cases. So as we look into a year that continues to be tumultuous, I'd be curious to maybe start with you, Samir. How do you see kind of these geopolitical, geoeconomic tensions playing out in the cybersecurity domain in the year and the next few years ahead?
That's a very big topic, but let me just try and give you a few trends.
Yeah.
The first, of course, is because of the heightened geopolitical tensions around the world. And literally conflicts now proliferate across the globe. The demand for cyber capabilities is an all-time high. And there is also, unfortunately, a public-private model that is in many ways being incubated because of this demand. Private sector is collaborating with governments to build cyber capabilities, and sometimes foreign governments as well. So in some sense, who is your adversary and what is this capability vis-a-vis your own is blurry. And many times when you deploy cyber weapons, you add to the adversary's capabilities. So in many ways, the deployment of cyber weapons and cyber capabilities is creating a zero-sum spiral to the bottom. But that is the mood we are in. And because of the higher threshold for violence that we all see around the world, and therefore the disturbance to the escalation ladder, we believe increasingly governments view cyber weapons and cyber attacks as a legitimate, informal, quasi vector to deploy with impunity. I think that's the first geopolitical outcome. The second, increasingly, is also that we have seen some inadvertent consequences of decoupling. And you were mentioning that how companies are reshifting their operations, moving out of certain geographies, moving away from certain vendors. What we are left with is that one part of the world is very familiar with the other part of the world, but that other part of the world that is decoupled does not have the same granular and intimate insight into the operating systems of the part that they have decoupled with, which means that deterrence has changed dramatically, which means that the part of the world that decided to decouple, say the US-based system, is today far more susceptible to adversarial impacts than the Chinese systems, of which very few countries have intimate knowledge. And I think there is an asymmetry because of this geopolitical fragmentation or the economic decoupling. And of course, the third is the big trend, the big shift, the big buzzword is AI. And for me, AI means everything and nothing at the same time, right? But all I can tell you is this, that as someone mentioned in a room we were in, which is true, that AI has increased the attack surface and the attack capabilities multifold. Has AI increased our defense capabilities and our ability to defend in the same ratio? And I think that's the point, because now you have taken away a big market shaper from the picture, which I was talking to someone sitting here earlier, that if the risk insurance markets are not able to factor in the implications of AI on the capacity of an organization or a country to defend itself, how is that sector going to evolve in the absence? Already the cybersecurity insurance market was so frail because there is no taxonomy, there is no agreed literature that allows us to price risk. But now with AI, you've added a layer of complexity which drives out these actors from shaping behavior. So now you have actually folks who see attack as the only form of cyber stability and capability, which makes it a dangerous battlefield to be.
No, thank you for that. And maybe I'd like just to bridge you. You were on AI, and I'd like to actually come to Kendra, right? You have this long experience, right? You were at Homeland Security, in CISA. You were deep in the trenches of looking, at kind of cyber protection, cyberspace, also your experience at Microsoft, and now leading Paladin. How have you seen this space evolving? Like if you compare, let's look back, say 10 years, where we are today, we're talking about, okay, maybe we can't define AI yet, but it's here. Everyone has a different definition. But also now we're starting to talk about, how do we encrypt for quantum? Have quantum safe encryption. And, we see some governments and institutions hoovering up data that they can't decrypt now in anticipation that they might decrypt it in the future. So how have you seen this space evolving, and what's top of mind for you right now based on where we are?
Well, this is great. So you're touching on just the whole bucket of emerging technologies, I think. And you brought up, Samir, the idea that AI perhaps is being used effectively and efficiently by adversaries wherever they are. I feel like AI has now democratized and made more efficient our adversaries. And so from my perspective and from my experience, I think they're winning. If we had to make it a game, right? They're winning. They're able to do things at speed and at scale with this newer technology. The good news is that AI makes defenders more capable too. The question is then, what is it, and when do we put it into our systems, and how do we protect it, right? The adversary doesn't have to, or the person that wants to use it for nefarious purposes is already, has high risk tolerance, right? So they don't have to worry about the risk. The inequity here is that defenders do. They have to not only worry about the risk in their systems and the use of it, but they also are incentivized to deploy it quickly because you have to match speed with speed. But when you're deploying it into your system, you want it to do something productive. You need to look at AI for what it is. It's, from my perspective, it's basically just fancy math and an algorithm put into your digital ecosystem, but it's more than that. It's data its model, its infrastructure, its application, and then there's the governance piece of it, if you had to break it down. You really do need to look at the vulnerabilities in that space. You need to assess what those are. You need to assess what the threats are, the age-old risk assessment, and then figure out prioritize what those are, and then figure out how to mitigate those risks while at the same time you're using it to defend your network against that kind of speed. Then you add to it another gloss, right? You add to it quantum, you mentioned it. Quantum is just going to supercharge AI. It is not just about cryptographic quantum, or post-quantum cryptography, but it's also about supercharging AI. It's about finding the power to really make AI as we imagine AI to be, right? So the quantum science of it all is also a space where we need to be innovative and aware that it's going to not only supercharge our own ability to discover new things in science, to discover a way to bottle up the sun and new fusion, new power sources, but it's also going to be a source of contention. I also argue that over time, you started with a geopolitical question, and you did outline briefly my experiences in cyber. For me, cyber has always been a geopolitical struggle for a while, but I can point to some very specific instances over the last 10 years of how we've treated cyber and integrating technologies into our digital ecosystem and the geopolitics of it all, starting with the United States treatment of Kaspersky, and then United States treatment of Huawei, or the Western treatment of Huawei and ZTE and other switches, and then TikTok, right? We've already seen how suppliers, vendors, integration into our digital infrastructure has geopolitical consequences. I think if I have to look over the horizon, after the work I did on ransomware and cybercrime and working at Microsoft and using the signals that they have to go chase bad guys, it was the best job. I see a disbursement of those that mean no good, right? So I don't necessarily see us being able to contain what we mean by the adversary in geopolitical borders. I can see, those that are using specific platforms, or those that are loosely tied together by a particular belief. I'm thinking of scattered spider as an example. But the use of those technologies across those disparate groups will make it difficult for us to think about this in neat geopolitical borders, if that makes sense. That's what I think emerging technology is going to deliver for us.
A lot of those boundaries are blurred. Attribution can be challenging, and moving on.
An additional dimension on this, if I may share.
Please.
I think there's a clear first mover advantage here for defenders. And the reason I say that is because if we look at the capabilities of AI in the hands of an adversary, we're concerned about novel vulnerability discovery. We're concerned about attack surface enumeration. And really, it becomes a race between us and them to see who can discover that first. Because if defenders can make the discovery first, it provides the opportunity for them to provide the remediation before an attacker discovers it and exploits it. So I think time matters here very much, and there absolutely is a first mover advantage for defenders.
Yeah, while you're on that topic, again, in our global cybersecurity outlook, we said, 66% of the organizations, I guess that was already from last fall, and today, we're probably closer to 85%, expect to have AI to have a significant impact on their cybersecurity. But only 37% have safeguards in place to assess AI tools before deployment. And for those of us in the cybersecurity domain, we've been familiar with this concept of shadow IT, right? That whatever the official device policy was, users would go out and find their own path, their own tools. They often perform better. They're easier to use. They were mobile friendly, and people would use their own tools and bring them to the office, and that created a vulnerability. What we see now is that people have moved from shadow IT to shadow AI, right? And so it's like, okay, whatever the corporate-sponsored, LLM model was that wasn't as well branded as the commercial options. People just, vote with their feet, use their phone, and are using these. You're working with these companies day in, day out. How do you see the corporate response on this? How do you see people navigating these kinds of risks with this, from shadow IT to shadow AI, and how are they approaching that?
So there are obviously a lot of shifts that are going on very rapidly right now. The first place that I would encourage people to look is at the basics and how well they're doing at mastering them. This is something I think that we tend to ignore because there's always something more exotic that draws our attention. But ensuring that we've got good adoption of principles of least privilege, zero trust, strong identity hygiene, that if we're developing software, that we're using memory-safe languages, that we're taking advantage of some of the AI tools that are being made available today to help to translate code from old C implementations over to Rust. There's a great DARPA program that's available called Tractor. It's translate all C to Rust. And I think it's a good early example of how AI can actually be used to help to transform the landscape of what our IT systems look like today. So just an encouragement toward that and ensuring that we've got just good adoption of hygiene and that we've got security operations centers. We're using managed detection and response services in our operations. And you made this point already, but when you're shopping for cyber insurance, actually check out after you filled your cart with the cyber insurance that you've selected. That's really important. And perhaps the most important is just keep practicing this, because having good disaster recovery is nice in theory, it's better in practice. So these are some of the most important things that organizations of any size can do, and it will deliver the highest ROI of just about any kind of an investment that they could make. The next thing that I'd say is that we probably need to see an evolution of the way that we're structuring our corporate incentives. And this is something that creates friction within environments for adopting better practices for how we navigate this new terrain. In particular, it would be really nice if we could start seeing things like executive compensation tied to risk-aligned OKRs, objectives and key results. So that's just one example. Another example, and many of these ideas, by the way, came up from some of the previous panels that we've been having here. Another one that I thought was quite interesting was budget structures that actually incentivize the right behaviors. So ensuring that the budget is sitting in the right place within the organization and it can be deployed properly without creating friction for what the primary organizational objective might be. And then the last point that I'd like to make on this is the third-party risk problem that we're dealing with has really exploded into an nth-party risk problem. And it's no longer accurate to refer to it as third-party. And maybe it's time for us to consider some new structures, borrowing from other concepts that we're using in the industry. We've been using software and hardware bills of material for quite some time now. It would be interesting for us to think about, and I know it's a daunting consideration, we should think about supply chain bills of material. And these are some general ideas that I think already exist that could probably be leveraged to help organizations better deal with the new threats that we're facing.
Yeah, Samir, quickly on this before
very
I come
quick.
to Dario.
Just something that both of you said triggers an idea that we are now already in an age where we have to move from permissions to trust. That concept of zero trust is gone, where you had automated authentication privileges given to certain employees at certain levels, and the value chain would sort out the access, and also you would find the rotten apples. Now, when identity can be manipulated using all sorts of tools available, and authentication is no longer the basis of trust, then organizations really need to rethink what trust means in this age. And how do you build a culture where employee participation through the process is central to a safe organization and a safe country, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, that's in general, the awareness in general terms for everybody, which is included in the same chain, and everybody's included in the same network. So the community is very important, and the awareness is very important for that.
Yeah. Now, Dario, you have a broad-based portfolio in Argentina, right? You're responsible for science, innovation, technology, but within that is also cybersecurity. And I'm just curious how you balance these tensions of driving growth, like unlocking the capabilities, the potential that these technologies offer, while also managing for the risks. How do you approach that in your role?
That's very interesting because I have on my plate technological services from the state to the state and from the state to the citizens. And that's a real challenge because we have different services for different parts of the structure, and taking care of that part of the structure is so important too. And cybersecurity, it's just a part which is involving everything. So we have to take care of everyone within the system. And if we take that global security in the whole system, we have to know that we are going to be as strong as the weakest link in the network. And that concept for us, which have a lot of different services and with a lot of different technologies implemented in different times, it's a total challenge. But there are some lines of action that we are taking care of and we are developing, which is cooperation between the public and the private sector, of course, and but also cooperation within regional centers and within different nations. For example, the WEF is a very important part for that because it's giving us the opportunity to connect and to have that kind of information coming from different places. And the creation and operation of regional security operations services, DRP, disaster recovery planning strategy. We are developing a total DRP strategy today in Argentina. We are defining a lot of critical infrastructures that can be attacked and the whole country can be in danger. Well, Costa Rica is one of those examples, but we are taking that in account more when we are talking about situation in the world, as Samir was talking about. And the implementation of cybersecurity training programs is so important because we need the human resources prepared for this kind of operations. We are developing, we are studying in a few months, but we are starting the development of a cyber arena for training our people, not only within the government, but for the public sector too. And taking into account the amount of losses that cybersecurity attacks can bring to companies, can bring to the states and for the taxpayers in general terms, it really doesn't matter how much money you have to invest on that, but you have to do that. Otherwise, being in danger is not an option for that. So.
Yeah. I was just curious, we touched on supply chains lightly earlier, and one question that's been coming up throughout this summit here is on this question of equity, right? Of imbalances between those who have access to AI, those who don't, those who have cybersecurity programs and those who don't. And as you're serving both the citizens and the state, the group I'm particularly interested in are SMEs, the small, medium enterprises that make up the backbone of the economy in almost every country, but don't necessarily have the skills or the capabilities to put the necessary cyber protection pieces in first. As Joe mentioned, to be leading of that, right, to get ahead of the adversarial attackers. How do you approach that group?
Well, that's public-private coordination and participation. This cyber arena is part of that. Training people for the public sector, but training people from SMEs, which don't have enough money to take care of cybersecurity. And sometimes they are like crossing their fingers, hopefully I don't have any attack. And when they are, but that's true. And when you're talking to the persons and to the people in charge of that companies, they always say, what can I do? And it's just like, well, here's the list. They grab the list and they say, there's no way I can do this. I mean, it's so expensive. So that's the way to interact within the public and the private sector with training human resources, telling them what to do and putting on their hands different services that they can take as a service. Cloud, it's part of the solution because cloud is bringing a lot of things to the SMEs that otherwise they would have to purchase equipment and then be part of the whole cybersecurity development. And when they buy the cloud, they have like part of the solution in there. Of course, then you have to be very clean on your operations. You have to be very precise when you are, for example, creating new users, deleting old users, the maintenance of the network. But in general terms, there are some solutions today that can come as a part of the solution for that SMEs.
I want to put you on the spot there, maybe just really quickly to come to you, Kemba. Do you care about who your cloud provider is? Like what country? We started off with geopolitics, right? So does your cloud provider need to be Argentina, Latin America? Are there, how do you think about that? Because we see increasingly it was taken for granted, but recent decisions and different things have led people to say, oh, wow, maybe I need my own, data sovereignty, cyber sovereignty, et cetera. How do you approach that?
Well, part of it, actually, we have a law, the data law in Argentina, which we are not allowed to send some part of the information abroad. So that's a problem too, because otherwise we could send everything to the cloud and we say, okay, it's in the cloud. Where's the cloud? The cloud is not inside Argentina, so we will have the problem. And we are liable for that. But in general terms, we foster the development for tools within the country. We have some tools within the country, but in general terms, we use different vendors from trusted vendors, let's say.
Global vendors?
Zero trust.
Great. So that's a lot.
Is there really such a thing as data sovereignty, though?
Yeah.
Like, can you truly say that your data is resident in a particular area?
I personally don't think so.
I don't
Let's hear
think
from
so.
Kemba.
I actually don't think that you can actually make data sovereignty. But I just wanted to address this inequity question because I find that in the U.S. context anyway, we were trying to figure out a way to shift cybersecurity risk, the burden of it, from those that are least resourced to those that are more resourced. So cloud service providers would be more resourced in doing that. And then we had several policy options for getting us there. But in that process and implementing that process and trying to implement those policy options, including assigning liability where we should, that one was one of my favorites, the most difficult one to do. I discovered that, and it came up in the first panel yesterday, the first panel, I think you were on it. We've been thinking about inequity in terms of have and have nots, and we really should be thinking about it in terms of experience, more experience and less experience. Because I found that in collaboration, and I'm going to use specific countries here, but that doesn't mean I want to exclude countries I engage with, but Estonia came to mind. It's a small country, but it had experiences that I could draw from. Much larger country. We're a diverse country. We don't have, they had an adversary on their back doorstep constantly. But drawing on those experiences is one way to think about it. Estonia was also in a position where it was colonized instead of a colonizer at one point, and so they would be able to exchange best practices with other similarly situated countries that have less experience in a way that was not necessarily matched from the United States. Another country that comes to mind is Israel. Germany was one I learned a lot from because it's a federated system, and they had to figure out security in a federated system. But I think we need to start thinking about inequity in terms of more experience and less experience, and try to raise everybody's security, because my security depends on Joe's security, depends on Dorian's, et cetera, et cetera. But I really do like that concept and playing with that idea. I think as we consider how to shift cybersecurity risk and burden, not just to the insurers, but to those that are more resourced, and then how do we deal with resilience at the end of buying down that risk, we can look to some examples that are applicable to today.
Okay, can I
Before I come to
Sure.
you, Samir, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to bring to the group here, just raise your hands. I will try to peek behind me as well. And while Samir is sharing,
points.
I'll look around here.
So two short points. One, I think I like Joe's point. I think there's a business opportunity here. The model we have today, and this is to your SME's point as well, the model we have today is that cyber offense is rewarding because the cost of being malicious is cheaper and the cost of defense for certain enterprises is exorbitant. So in a sense, you have the Swiss bank effect where the elites are protected better than the medium and small enterprises are. Can we flip this? And I think this is the business model.
Yep.
Can we make defense dominant and low cost? And if we can do that, there are trillions of dollars to be had in the future as the surface area of digital businesses expand. That's the first one. The good news is we have now a supportive architecture besides the big two. And I say the big two, I say the US system and the Chinese system. We have, in fact, the geography we are sitting in and many others in South Asia and in Latin America as well, along the Amazon, you have big investments going in for finding the third way, in some sense, other ways of building capabilities and capacities and in fact tools. So I think we now have the ability to actually design solutions for the proverbial bottom of the pyramid because it's not that low and it's getting richer.
I would like
think
to.
the other part of that equation, yes, we need to make it more costly for cybercrime or adversarial use of tools.
My point is we need to make it cheaper to defend.
We need to make it cheaper to defend, but also more costly
to attack.
But we also need to make the use of tools nefariously to be less profitable. And I don't know what that lever is. How do we make it less profitable at the same time that we're making it cheaper to defend?
There have been some really good conversations about disruption related to that, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for it. The same way that we have supply chains, they have supply chains. And if our supply chains can be disrupted, their supply chains can be disrupted. So more effort should go into that. I want to pile onto your optimism, though, because I do believe that there is a tremendous opportunity for this that has been unlocked by AI. And I'm not positioning AI as a panacea. I'm not saying agents are going to solve all the problems in the world for us. But I think there is an opportunity in the market to solve a problem that up until now I think has been a market failure. We've been great at buying and selling technologies. I think there's a lot of just exemplary cybersecurity technology that's out there today. Many organizations are probably using them in one way or another. They're just not operationalizing them efficiently. And the reason for that is because they lack strategies for what it is that they're doing. And up until now, there really hasn't been a model to scale cybersecurity strategies. And I think that with agentic AI, there really is the potential for us to do that sort of thing. So we were curious about this problem because we operate in the space of the small to medium enterprise as well as the large enterprise. We have a very large footprint of very, very small customers who categorically would operate below the cybersecurity poverty line. We wanted to know just how big is that problem. So research found that there are approximately 359 million organizations in operation in the world today.
Wow.
And we were curious how many CISOs there were who were servicing those organizations. There are about 32,000. So you've got about 32,000 CISOs or CISO-like titles in the world who are attempting to defend 359 million organizations. It's a ratio of 10,000 to 1. Those are not good odds. So this is why I say this is a market failure. We haven't figured out how to address this yet. And I think that we do have the potential to do that now.
Yeah, Samir, you did make me think of going from Napster to Spotify, right? They made discovery search. That's cheap enough. You didn't put everything out of business, but majority of it. Why don't we take a question from the floor? If you could identify yourself and address the question.
Yes, Mauricio Benavides from Batuta. I just want to ask everybody, we're part of the conversation topic is riding the storm. So I feel like we're already in the storm. And a lot of the conversation is talking about how we're going to prevent that storm. But what do you guys think that we're already hacked? So taking that into consideration, what should we be thinking or doing as we're riding already the storm? How do we get out there? How do we leave that storm and come back to calm?
Great. Who wants to offer the
Sorry for
first?
changing the topic a little bit.
So if you're talking about the storm being like the use of emerging technologies deployed by the bad guy, and we're all sort of being chased by the bad guy, or you're talking about the storm being the geopolitical situation, environment?
I think we're talking about small companies
Yeah.
and big companies and all that. And my view, the way I
Yeah.
Need to know when, and what are we gonna do about it? So I
Yeah.
think a lot of it is.
Okay, so I heard for our viewers there, so, we've already been hacked, small companies there, right?
Yeah.
Is the whole range there? Come on.
Oh, no, so I think, I said, and I stand by it, I am actually optimistic, although I'm going to sound pessimistic. The adversary is already using emerging technologies to their advantage at a far more effective pace than we are using it as defenders. I think that's the storm. They haven't used it to find the 0 day yet, the big bang, but a lot of small cuts, and they're winning. I think we have to match speed with speed. We have to deploy the technology and not be afraid of it, but we do have to be considerate of what is it that we want it to do and how are we going to deploy it in a way that we maintain that advantage, right? And I think of systems, and this is data, model, infrastructure, application, and governance. What are the vulnerabilities in all three? How do we close those vulnerabilities? And we need to move that quickly. And I think you're right, Joe. I think AI could be a force multiplier for helping CISOs, and I God bless CISOs, but helping CISOs to defend organizations in a way that we just didn't have before.
I realize we want to address that question to everybody. I think I have a question behind us and one to my left. And for those of us in the room, we'll have the chance also to grab people offline. So let me open up another question here.
Gosh, you have eyes on your back.
Victor.
Amazing. My name is Max Mead, co-director of Virtual Roots. In the US, we have seen a debate happening again about hackback and raising the cost, being more proactive, active against the attackers. I'm raising it here because Mr. Levy, for Sophos, you have an extremely interesting case here. Pacific Rim, one of the most prominent cases of a private sector actor, really going after the bad guys for a multi-year campaign. I was wondering here if you could share your stories, whether you believe this is something that every company should do. Is Sophos unique in that, and some of those challenges that you face there as well?
And before you answer that, I'm going to just take one more question together, and then we'll be able to pull them all together at the end.
Hi. Hello.
Yes, very good.
Hi, I'm Larry Clinton. I'm with the Internet Security Alliance, and I am a very optimistic person by nature. But I'm afraid I really need to challenge the panel's excessive optimism with respect to where we are in cybersecurity. We're getting killed out there. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. The bad guys are in our critical infrastructure. We can't get them out. We're suffering hundreds of millions of attacks a day. We're losing trillions of dollars. I think there's some good ideas. I'm not saying there aren't any opportunities, but I have to wonder whether or not the temptation to sound positive is blinding us to the fact that we are losing this fight, and we are losing this fight badly and have been for quite a while. I'm in favor of changing the incentives for small companies. We have an anti-tax administration in the United States Congress. Where's the tax credit for small companies to cybersecurity? We can't even get the 2015 Act, which is everybody loves, reauthorized. That's nothing.
Yeah.
We are not accomplishing nearly as much as we need to. I would like to hear a little bit more about how we are going to change the narrative and bring more people to the cybersecurity community to kind of get us over the line, because I'm afraid I don't share the optimism for where we're going. I think things are going to continue.
Okay, we're going to use that question to give everyone one last response.
Okay, so let me quickly jump in.
He's challenging us, right? We're saying we're
it's a
using
good
life
challenge.
jackets.
But
right?
I think, look, some of your challenge is colored by what's happening in your part of the woods. And maybe that's also, in a sense, infecting your optimism on what could be done together. Because it's a big challenge right now, what you're experiencing, a big disruption, political disruption. But let me respond to you. One, I think we all agree that we are facing significant headwinds, and some are really harmful and perhaps most consequential for the weakest, and that's a given. And I don't think that's gone away. Now, the question is, are we going to be able to do the three things that we've all spoken about separately, or perhaps even collectively? One, can we build those arenas, like the cyber arenas, at a scale? Can we operationalize them at a scale where we are able to bring and build a community of actors who are empowered to respond, because like we said, cybersecurity is a collective act. It cannot be managed by a single country or a single agency or a single institution. And hence we need more people on the job. And we haven't built a business case for building that community that is going to help all of us prevent the value of cyber impacts to be the third largest country in the world, or something that your report says. In GDP terms, it's the third largest country if we were to calculate it. So it's in all of our interest to invest in a community that can defend, right? So like I said, defense, dominant and low cost, and hence everyone participates. Second, we spoke about the laws that you were talking about, getting some benefits and creating incentives. Look, we have to create incentives which are global. I think the incentives within the US or within Argentina or within a country are no good. You're as weak as the weakest link, right? So in that sense, what are the global incentives? And here the political mood is going to make it difficult. And the third and the final one, of course, I think emerging technologies, Joe mentioned, hypercomputing and AI can actually bring to scale the first two that I'm talking about. You can bring communities to play, you can train them, you can actually organize them, you can empower them with hypercompute, courtesy quantum, and I can see someone sitting here who works on that. Hypercompute plus AI, it creates a whole new landscape. Optimism is not about where we are. Optimism is about where we may be. And I think that's where we are headed.
Thank
we are
you,
in
Samir.
a bad place.
Good. Joe.
So, Larry, you and I sat on the bus this morning and we had a short version of this conversation. My succinct answer to you is better operationalization. We spend a lot of time talking about threat intelligence sharing. We don't spend enough time talking about the operationalization of the threat intelligence. And I think if we could refocus the energy toward that, I think it begins to make an immediate difference and it begins to actually impact the problem in a way that moves the needle. So that would be my short answer, but looking forward to continuing that conversation with you. I did want to quickly address the gentleman in the back's question about hackback. First, I'll say I do not believe in cyber letters of marque. That's not what I am recommending. I don't think that we should be providing any sort of imprimatur to private organizations to go hack back against whoever the adversary might be. We mounted a defensive campaign that had a few offensive components to it. And I encourage all of you to check out the Pacific Rim research that we disclosed. But I think it's going to serve as an interesting precedent for the industry and discussion about the topic going forward.
Great. Thank you. Dario.
Actually, I'm a Star Wars fan. And some part of this conversation remind me of Bad Batch, which is part of the saga, animated saga, actually. And the Empire was trying to decide whether to go to build some new drones with a lot of technology or train humans. And it's fantastic because the decision was train humans. It's cheaper. In this case, we are only depending on humans. And we are only depending on HR. We are only depending on upskilling, reskilling, having more people within the cybersecurity community, and the communication and the collaboration between countries, regions, public, private sector is fundamental. I agree with you, we are losing bad. Because and the states are the worst part, because the states are big, are slow, and we tend to have long time decisions that are not in the pace of what the bad guys are doing. They are grabbing some new technologies and putting all together and attacking. And we are slow. So the only way to have this on a circle and try not to lose that badly is to have more people on the cybersecurity community, communicate within the community, that community, and collaborate. Everybody should collaborate on this. There is no other way.
And I just have two responses. One is I would like to stop talking about cybersecurity and talk about protecting the business, enterprise interests, whatever it is, because we need more people talking to each other about that, and not just the people in the room that we see. Larry, we see each other often. The other thing I'd like to point out is I think we need to start thinking about new alliances, new structures. I think we're trying to fit this global problem into existing structures that aren't fit for purpose. So I really would like to see some creative thinking and new alliances, new structures for the security of all of our benefits.
Great. So I'd like to invite you to give our panelists an applause there.